Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our service today, I'm going to ask if we can turn off or silence all cell phones or electronic devices. Thank you.
With each passing hour, we come to realize how fragile this life truly is. With each passing day, we appreciate more and more how blessed we really are. We stand in awe of God's love that allows us to grow, wondering what we have done to deserve such graciousness. But in the end, our lives are indeed but a passing breath, and all that will remain is the shadow of where we once stood. So we pray to God, teach us to number our days, give us the wisdom to realize what matters most. Help us to remember, as Sol Schwartz did each and every day, that integrity and honor are eternal, and the decisions we make today will shape the memories of us in the future. Those whom we have loved, now hidden from view, continue to guard our lives when our values mirror theirs. When we have difficult decisions to make, we call on those who guided us. When we need love and support, they're still with us. For as long as we shall live, they will live too. They are forever a part of us as we remember them. Mizmor David Adonai Roi Lo Exor Beno Deshe Yar Bitseni Al Memenuchot Yinahaleni Nafshi Shovei V'Ancheni V'Magalei Tzedek Leman Shemo Gam Ki Elech Begates Al Mavet Lo Ira Ra Ki Ata Imadi Shivtecha mishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shochan neged tzororai dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yudifuni ko yamechayai v'shabti b'beit Adonai l'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness, reviving my soul for the sake of his glory. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff, your rod do comfort me. You set a table in the sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. Good people, it is with heavy hearts that we come together today to pay tribute to the true patriarch of this family, Sol Schwartz, a giant of a man who lived a life of integrity and honor, fully devoted to his family, and yet with boundless compassion for everyone whose lives he touched. You know, if you were looking for a textbook definition of self-made man, you need look no further than Sol Schwartz. Sol was a man of deep faith, deeply committed to Jewish life. He would get up and daven every morning from that same Siddur, Steve. I see you hold it in your hand. I'm sure you'll show it to us in a moment. He received his first bar mitzvah in 1942. After he davened, he would study text. Over the years, he would call me up and stop by for visits, trying to get my understanding of our rich, book-centered faith, which endlessly intrigued him. He was a man of boundless curiosity. As we sat together as a family, I watched a short video of Sol conducting the family Seder. He was in all his glory. I thought afterwards, that word Seder truly defines your dad. The word Seder means order. Everything done, particularly according to a ritual fashion. It wasn't just that he loved the Seder, had notes and more notes in his Haggadah, but he lived his life according to a Seder, according to an order. A man of ritual and routine. He knew how to make plans, how to make lists, and to follow them through. And the end result of that thoughtful living is the magnificent life that he led, and you, the beautiful family he raised. Sol grew up in Philadelphia, not far from the zoo on Girard Avenue. I was told he used to tell the weather from listening to the Lions. Sol was the youngest of Sam and Frances Schwartz's 4 children. There was his oldest brother, Harold, who had to go out and work hard to provide for the family. And Sol always appreciated that. To say that they grew up in poverty is an understatement. There was always enough food, but they were never sure whether the gas or electric was going to be turned off because the family couldn't pay the bills. Sol had a brother, Jerry, of blessed memory, Yankee as he was known, the fun one, as well as his beloved sister Estelle. He remained close to them, and I know that some of their family are here today, and it brings you comfort to know that they are. I know that for many years, Sol was more than just an uncle. To those family members, he was, as he was in so many lives, a father figure. Sol knew from a young age, from the time that he was very little, what it meant not to have a protective father, clearing the path for his children's success. And so early on in life, your dad made an important decision that would never, ever happen to his family or his children. And so he set about being that strong and independent man, a family man with a heart of gold, that mensch that so many of us knew, respected, and admired. He never forgot his roots, and he was forever concerned with the dignity of every individual regardless of their station in life. Empathy, kindness, and compassion were at the root of Sol Schwartz's being. Intellectually gifted, he went to Central High School. From there, he went to the University of Delaware and undergraduate school. He went to work for DuPont. His entrepreneurial spirit obvious right away. It wasn't too long before he had an idea for a business of his own. And he was grateful for the many people who helped him as he was starting out with nothing. And he would spend the rest of his life looking out for people who needed that leg up to give it to others the way that it was bestowed on him. When he felt ready, when the right woman came along, he married your mom, Nadine. And in time, they were blessed with the two of you, Melissa and Steve. Each of you will speak from your hearts in just a moment or two. But to say that your dad was your rock is also an understatement. He was so much more than a source of stability. He was, simply put, the finest man you ever met. Many fathers have done superbly, but he surpassed them all. Your dad made sure that the four of you had a lot of fun in the early years, and it was wonderful wonderful childhood. Again, according to a Seder, home for dinner every night at 5:30. In time, unfortunately, he became a single parent after your mom passed, and somehow he managed to raise a family, start a business, and to never let his positive spirit falter, and more importantly, yours. He always had the attitude that things were going to be okay, because your dad knew in his heart he would make it okay. And he always did. He looked out for the two of you, as I'm sure you will say in a moment, bringing out the best in both of you. You could have no better teacher in the school of life than your father. And both of you made him very, very proud. Your dad was also proud of the families that you yourselves made. Michelle, you knew Steve and Sol from the time that you were a teenager. It's kind of like you were a member of the family even before you got married. He insisted that you call him Dad, and it was an easy thing for you to do, and you were honored to do so. You were a blessing in Sol's life. And so are you, John. Sol knew right away that you would be a wonderful partner for his daughter, and the respect and the admiration that you have for Sol is now, and since I have always known you, so palpable. He is such an important part of the man who you are. He not only recruited you to marry his daughter, but recruited you to come down here to help in the business. And it says so much that you actually lived with Sol even before Melissa, you could finish things up in Boston so that the family could be together. And his strength, his character, is clearly reflected in his daughter and son-in-law. And from you, of course, you came to know the blessing, the joy of grandchildren, of wonderfully devoted grandchildren. Jordan, Noah, Dylan, Braden, as well as you, Jacob and Macy. It was both joyous and heartbreaking to hear you speak about your papa yesterday. He appreciated each and every one of you for the unique individuals you are. He was always there with words of encouragement, thrilled to see every milestone each of you reached. He described being a grandfather as a thing of pure beauty, and he made sure that every moment that you were together was meaningful, memorable. Whether it was going to the Phillies games or playing golf or bowling or just seeing him at every one of your events, every day, every minute you spent with Pop-Pop was precious. He taught you the meaning of hard work and a whole host of important values that all of you will carry for the rest of your lives. He was always looking for ways to connect. And The depth of your sadness is a clear indication to me of just how successful he was in connecting with your hearts. The reward for living a good life was that God sent Sol his beloved Rose. As he described her to me, she was the missing piece of the puzzle. She completed him and forever made him happy. The two were head over heels in love. The Rose, as you remember, had a natural radiance, lighting up every room she entered, and that light was always reflected on Sol's face. They shared so many happy times here and in Florida, traveling, entertaining, spending time with great friends. And Rose's family became Sol's family. There were no lines drawn between you. Audrey and John were like children of his own. Leslie like a daughter. He took great pride in Liza and Ross, Justin and Sydney, as well as their families too. Each and every member of the family was grateful, not only for the happiness that the two of them shared, but to have him as a mentor in your lives as well. He had a unique ability not only to feel for other people, but find ways to enrich their lives. He inspired tremendous loyalty amongst those who worked for him and with him. He looked out for them and their families too. He really helped more people than any of us will ever know. He was the kind of person who gave tzedakah anonymously, never wanting to compromise any individual, having them to ask. But if anyone asked, they immediately walked away with something in hand. He gave to individuals, he gave to organizations, he gave materially and intellectually to the state of Israel, which he loved. In fact, one of the greatest joys of his life was going with all of you to Israel for his 80th birthday. Every day in his prayers, he prayed for the Jewish state, and being there with you made him supremely happy. I could go on and on about what a fantastic role model Sol was, what a brilliant businessman he was. He was successful in his every endeavor, in part because he never did anything halfway. Work, hobbies, faith, he was all in. But what he was most all in for was his family, from whom you will hear shortly. He loved you all with every fiber of his being, and he was an inspiration to all of you. These last months were especially trying, and Melissa, you were an inspiration to his family. You, your selfless devotion, added years to his life and life to his years. Sol's greatest gift was the gift of giving you family. Love one another. He has shown you all how to do life right. And so I pray that you live fully and love deeply as he did. For in doing so, you will be blessed by the eternal soul of this incredible man. And so we pray, Tehi Nishmato, Tzror B'Tzror Chaim, may the soul of Shlomo ben Shmuel be bound in the bond of eternal life, and his memory be a blessing in the hearts and homes of all of those who knew and loved him forever. And together we say, Amen. As I mentioned, we'll hear from family. We'll be starting with you, Steve.
Dad and I talked a lot about what would happen when he was gone. He was a child of the Depression. He grew up around a lot of personal, physical, financial trauma. But as Rabbi said, he always had a plan for every eventuality. He had lists and flowcharts and tables. And this was before technology, where most of us would use a spreadsheet. He had graph paper and accountant's paper, and Post-it notes when they were invented were like the greatest thing for him, because not only would he have the sheet of paper, he could expand the sheet of paper and have more possibilities to plan. And over the last few days, I've been trying to come up with a way to briefly convey the essence of a man who to me was an absolute giant, who I looked up to for 52 years. I say briefly because the one thing my dad and I shared was our complete and utter lack of brevity. As my dad said to Melissa and I, though, countless times, do your best. So I'm going to give it a shot, be brief, not cry, and more importantly, what I know he'd want you all to leave with today is just a little something so you go outside and make someone else's life just a little bit better. But how do you encapsulate 93 years in a few minutes? In text messages with people over the last few days, I kind of say the same thing. I'd say, was born the son of poor immigrants, had rheumatic fever as a boy, with scarred lungs and a heart. Wasn't supposed to live past 35, but on the strength of his intelligence and character, he got himself educated. He went off to corporate life, began a 40-year entrepreneurial career where he found success he could have never dreamed of as a kid. He spent over 25 years with the love of his life and had children and grandchildren he adored and built a life and lifestyle that he loved, up until the end. So that kind of sums it up. But I kept saying the same word over and over again, and that was love. That was his defining trait. Michelle said to me this morning, she said, it's ironic, for someone who struggled his whole life with a damaged and weakened physical heart, he loved so much and so powerfully with his soulful heart. So I'm going to tell you that's some of the things that he loved. And I say some because there are so many things he was passionate about. But with him, and I find it true of myself sometimes, that there was only 0 and 100. He'd say to me, if you're going to do something, don't do it half-assed. Give everything you have. And give is kind of what he did. So here's a few things that he loved and gave throughout his life. If you talk about my dad, the first thing that comes to mind is the love of his faith, his Jewish heart. He was brought up in a religious home, and his faith was never diluted as he got older. As he became more successful and more demands on his time, every day, he'd take 15 minutes in his closet and he'd pray. From 1942, when he got this siddur, it's being held together by tape and I think there's some glue in here left, until probably sometime in the 90s when it was just literally falling apart in his hands and he had to use something different. He prayed every single day. And on Saturdays he would finish his prayers and open up a Torah and he would study that. And heaven forbid any of us ever interrupted him. If I came running into his room and he was praying, shh, I would cower in fear because you just never interrupted the man during his morning prayers. And, he told me about this siddur because basically this is the only thing he got for his bar mitzvah. There were no checks, there were no big parties or videos or whatever. This is what you got. And the suit that he wore was actually the first piece of new clothing that he had ever gotten in his life. Every other piece of clothing up until he was 13 was a hand-me-down. But when he prayed, he didn't just recite the prayers that were written in the book. And he wasn't really just praying for himself. He'd pray for the health of someone else who had fallen sick or was suffering from some other type of trauma. His Judaism was based on giving love and hope to others. And I can't tell you how many times I would tell him about this person or, was sick or this person's parents sick or, the child sick. And his immediate response was, I'll add them to my prayers. And he did. Every holiday, we'd go to Bethel and we go to services, and usually on the high holidays most people go from a certain time to a certain time. No, we had to go every single time that they were having a service. Rosh Hashanah was literally a 3 full day in service in the synagogue event, and he just loved every second of it. It wasn't him, it wasn't an obligation, it was just what he did. It was it was the things that he was taught as a kid. And he tried to teach it to us and tried to live an example so that we would see and one day pass it on to our kids. But from his faith, I think, came another love of his, and that's the love of tzedakah, of charity. And as long as I can remember, he was always working on some sort of charitable endeavor. He loved to give to others. It didn't matter if it was a family friend, a friend, or even strangers. He loved to give. He loved the state of Israel, again, as a son of the Depression, and seeing what Hitler was able to do to the Jewish people in World War II. The state of Israel represented a safety net for all Jews to escape oppression. That clearly resonated with him, and over the years he started programs for everything we'd call now venture capital investing in Israel, to Israel bonds and water reservoirs in Israel, and desalination plants, and all sorts of things to build infrastructure to secure the future of the Jewish homeland. He loved his Jewish heritage from when he was a kid, so he and the old Yiddish theater. And so the books that aren't really made anymore, he decided he was going to support the National Yiddish Book Center. But telling these things doesn't tell you really who he was in his charitable spirit. So I'm going to give you a couple more specific examples. When I started working in the business about 25 years ago, every day a stack of mail would come in about this big. Some of the people in the room nod their heads. And in that stack of mail, hopefully that many would be checks. Then there would be some bills, and then there would just be a stack about that high, sometimes more, of solicitations from every charity under the sun. It wasn't just Jewish charities; it was American Cancer Society, Alzheimer's, Red Cross, whatever. And every single one of them, he put a number on them and sent them a check. And I remember there were some years we'd be having bad years, and I'd say, "Dad, come on, what are you doing? I'm trying to balance everything." He'd say, "Nah. If they come to you and ask, you give." And he believed that it would be okay, because as long as he gave, he'd be okay. Another way he gave back to others was through work. He believed that every single person deserved the dignity of working and earning a paycheck. So if he heard someone who was down on his luck, who didn't have a job or whatever, he insisted that they come and work for us. If someone in the family or a friend, he'd find a place to make it work. We had a friend who was into marketing, and they had lost their job. Brought this person in. 6 months, they put together a marketing plan, and they were really proud of it. We didn't need a marketing plan, by the way, but he said, "Do a marketing plan." And so they finished, and they'd gotten a full-time job. They brought in this big binder, took 2 pages, put it on the shelf, never looked at it again. I said, "Dad, what?" He said, they felt good doing that, and they got their dignity back, and they put themselves back on their feet. So it's worth every penny. The story I tell the most, and this name might resonate with some, was a guy named Angelo Arricchetti. He was the mayor of Camden. He got caught up in that whole ab scam thing, and they made the movie American Hustle about it. And so back in the day, after he went to prison, my dad had known him. There were a bunch of guys who got together at a diner in Mount Ephraim, and he would come and sit. And when he got out of prison, my dad saw him. He was down on his luck. He was kind of toxic. And my dad said, "Here, you know what you're going to do? You're going to come in. I'm going to give you an office. I'm going to give you a phone. Secretary will type your letters. The only thing I'm going to ask is that you put on a jacket and tie." And that's what the guy did. He came into the office and was able to present himself to society as a rehabilitated person. And I think I look back on all those little examples. It wasn't so much the paycheck, it is that he wanted every person to walk with their head high and have some dignity, and knew that somebody else was looking out for them. Because when he was coming up, as Rabbi said, he didn't have that. So he wanted to give it, just like he's given it to us, he wanted to give it to everybody. I mean, there are countless others, but one time I was in ShopRite, and it's about 10 years ago, so he was, 83, 84, and he wanted to get vegetables. I was like, all right, fine, I'll go with you to get vegetables. And I'm standing there in the vegetable aisle looking at tomatoes or something, all of a sudden he's gone. Now I'm like panicking, so I walk around, I come around, and he's by one of the cash registers. And he walks away, and I see him walking over to the manager and reach into his pocket and hand the guy some money. So as I walk up, I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I was standing by the line there, and there was a woman, and it was clear she couldn't afford all the groceries that she was buying, and she started taking things out off of the belt. And I looked at it, and I told the cashier, I got it all, put it all back on. And then he went back to go to the manager. That's when I came up, and he says, all right. Hands him a stack of cash, and he says, okay, if you ever see that happen again, I want you to use this money. If they look like they need it, you give it to them. And then he said, when you run out of money, he points to me, he goes, call him. It happened not even sooner. We were at the Apple store at the mall, and he could never figure out, as brilliant of a guy as he was, as much as he could come up with these elaborate plans and had really complex, nuanced thinking, he always struggled with his iPhone. And so we go to the Apple store because he was convinced something was wrong with it. So we're waiting there, and again, I'm looking at something. All of a sudden, he's gone again. I look up, he's back in the back left corner, and he's with one of the Apple guys, and the guy's swiping his credit card. I'm like, oh God, what did he do? Did he buy? So I walk back, and the guy says thank you, and he walks on. I said, what was that? And he said, well, there was a little kid over there. He was with his mom, and the kid was wearing like a Camden Elementary School shirt or something. I don't know. And he said, and his mom was waiting to get her phone fixed, and the kid wanted an iPad. And the mom said, there's no way we can afford an iPad to stop it. And he said the kid took it like, the kid was probably 6 years old, the kid took it like a man and just didn't argue with the mom. And he said, I thought that was so awesome. So I told the guy to buy him an iPad. So I bought him. And I could literally bore you guys to death with 80 of these stories, but that's the kind of guy he was. It really was a loving and kind heart. And he loved the career that he built. He was an entrepreneur. He started out at DuPont. But again, when he left DuPont to start this business, he didn't have any money. And literally, there was a guy, his name was Joe Hernberg. He had a manufacturing business in Pennsauken. Thought he was hungry. Like, he said, kid, I'll give you a desk. That's where it started. I'll give you a desk. And you can think. So he had this idea of taking all the new plastics that they were making back in the late 50s and 60s and selling it to industry, and he was going to call it Plastics Consulting Company. See, Jordan, you weren't the first consultant in the family. And he did that for a couple of years, and sure enough, he had all these great ideas, but he couldn't find anyone to manufacture them. So it became Plastics Consulting and Manufacturing Company, PCM, for short. And that started in 1962. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary in February. He was able to come in. And really, by the time I came around, and I was old enough to understand, he'd been in business 20 years, and as I started to meet employees and suppliers, and hear the same words: tough, fair, honest, caring. The first three words made sense to me in business. Tough, fair, honest. But caring? That's not what we were taught. But that's who he was. He literally cared about the people who worked for him. I can't explain what he did, but the fact that we have so many people who work for PCM for 30 years is proof enough. It's clear to me that it wasn't the paycheck. It was clear that he gave them a sense of safety, direction, leadership, and pride. He took pride in the business being in an underserved community like Camden, giving people who grew up like him a shot to earn an honest living with dignity. And he was so proud of having employees who brought their brothers to work at PCM, and then their children to work at PCM. And nothing made him prouder when he would look at me and say, if you take care of the place will take care of you. And I've always tried to live up to that mantra to this day. He loves sports, and particularly Philly sports, more than anything, like a lot of us. He would read the entire sports section of the paper cover to cover every day. Like, even still, he might be the only person on earth who actually was still getting the newspaper delivered up till this week. His number one love was the Phillies, and other than, good run in the 90s, he probably spent years complaining. But if there was a home game on Sunday, he would go, usually taking Rose or one of the grandkids with him. I think that's one of the times he was also at his happiest, just sitting there on the third base line. In fact, when the synagogue, we were talking about, they said, well, what if people want to make a donation, where should they send it? And I instinctively said, JNF and National Yiddish Book Center, and kind of stopped for a second. I was like, well, maybe they can send money to the Phillies, because he would love them to be able to get better players. He and I had countless Eagles, Sixers, Phillies games together. He was a huge lifelong fan. When the Eagles won the Super Bowl, we were all together. My memory of all of us, all the kids being there, hugging him, watching the championship. That's something that's going to live with me forever. But aside from being a sports fan, the sport he loved to play the most was golf. A lot of people know me as a passionate golfer, but long before I started, he was hardcore. Played 3 times a week. Really until he was about 85. He didn't grow up in a country club life. Really, when he graduated college, he hadn't played at all. But when he went to work for DuPont, one of his mentors said, "If you want to get ahead in business, learn how to play golf." Remember that. And that began a 50-year golf career where he played all over the world, and he took his own unique spin on the game. Right? He, as an observant Jew, he wouldn't write on Shabbat. He wouldn't write on Saturdays. If we were somewhere and he charged something on the credit card, somebody else would have to sign for it. And I'd say, "Dad, it's kind of contradictory, right?" And he said, "Well," I said, "You're playing golf on Saturday." He goes, "Well, God rested on Saturdays. I play golf to relax, so it's kind of the same thing." And his Jewish faith even permeated the actual act of playing golf. Now, most people, when they play, take a golf ball and put a little mark, a little dot or an initial or something on their ball. Not my dad. He took the ball and put a circle around the top 25% of it, so it had a yarmulke on it. And I said, I'd say, "Dad, that looks ridiculous, right?" And he said, "Yeah, but if you putt a ball that has a yarmulke on it, it's more likely to go in." But when he traveled, he loved to play from as far west as tip of British Columbia, as far south as South and Central America, through Europe. He loved it. But nowhere did he love it more than being down in Boca, where he had a crew of guys who, they were together every other day, and he loved the camaraderie, the banter, the kibitzing. If you couldn't be around those guys and talk about the stock market, sports, politics, or how pretty the cart girl was, you couldn't fit in. But they just had the time of their lives. And really, he was, again, he just loved it and was passionate about it. And there were so many other things. Other hobbies, travel. He was a big cigar smoker. Loved smoking cigars until, health-wise, he had stopped. He was smoking in the car, in the office, and all that. He tried every diet under the sun. All right, and really only in his later years, kind of got his weight under control. He loved gardening, loved growing vegetables, loved growing, planting flowers. He took such pride in all the flowers, even where he lived, and they did all the gardening for you. Now he had to do his own, planting all sorts of crazy things. The list goes on and on. But the number one thing that he loved was his family. Growing up, there was never a question of his commitment as a dad to Melissa and I. He became a single father, and that wasn't really a thing, right? This is back in late 70s, early 80s. But and there was no roadmap to do it. You know, he was figuring it out as he went. But every single day, he would tell us, "You're the greatest." I can still hear him say it to me every single day. Even if I didn't believe it, he'd say, "You're the greatest," with such conviction that he forced me to believe it. And he did this all, you know, during the ups and downs of doing a business, of building a business. You know, later in life, later when we would talk, he would tell me about times where, you know, money didn't come in that week, and he had payroll he had to make on Friday, and he'd be under tremendous stress. But, you know, in my memory, every day he came home for dinner at 5:30 in the morning, or 5:30 at night, with a smile, big hug, and we never had a clue. He talked about anything but his problems, always protecting his family from whatever fears and anxieties he had. He adored his brothers and sister. He reveled in holiday dinners when we would go to their homes or they would come to ours. It was always clear how much he loved their kids and their kids' kids, and how all of them looked up to him. You know, it was always interesting because he was the little brother of the group, you know, 14, 15 years separating. And but they all looked up to him. And all their kids, you know, Stuart, Adrian, Shelley, Wayne and Jeff, Bonnie, Cliff, he looked at all of you guys like children as well. There were times with some you had to step in and really take the role to be the father. And he did it without any hesitation whatsoever. Because again, he didn't have it. So he wanted to make sure nobody didn't know what that was like. Nobody knew what that was like. Those of you who are here today, I know how he inspired you. I know how devoted he was to you. And I know how proud you made him. They say 3 times a charm. So the 3rd time my dad got married, he got it right. He spent 25 years with the woman who was the love of his life, Rose. May she rest in peace. Their love affair was something that we should all model. They laughed and danced and traveled and relaxed, and you know, they enjoyed the latter part of their lives together. You know, we talk about living your best life. They lived their best life, right? And they did it together. And with Rose came this whole new family that we kind of brought into our crew. And her you know, daughter Audrey, and Ross and Liza and Justin, later Sydney, and John and Leslie, and their kids Noah and Brandon. And my dad loved each and every one of them so much. And just never saw, there was no step. There was never, you know, you say stepchild, stepson, there was no step. It's my grandchild. And and the reason I know this is because I know how he would tell stories to me of, you know, Melissa brought her kids down, but if John brought his kids, it was the same thing. You know, it was really the same thing. He really tried to be a grandfather to everyone. And you know, at the end, when Rose became too sick for Dad to take care of, he had to, you know, and she had to go into a nursing home. My dad probably taught me my greatest lesson. Because at that point, he stopped going to Florida, which is what he loved. Pretty much stopped playing golf. And basically every day, just about, he would get in the car after breakfast, drive over, and just spend the day with Rose. And that's what he did every day until COVID started. They wouldn't let him in anymore. And didn't matter that she didn't know who he was. He would take her to the mall and walk with her. And then when she couldn't walk, he would take her to the mall and push her in a wheelchair. And when he couldn't push her in a wheelchair anymore, he paid some guy to come, put them in a car with the wheelchair, and he would just kind of walk alongside. And it would be cold outside. You know, he'd stay up here. And the weather didn't react well with him. I said, Dad, just go to Florida for like a week, 2 weeks. Just get here. You know. Nah, she needs me. She'd know if I wasn't here. That was the utter devotion he had to Rose. And again, always giving his love to others. It's that same word over and over again. You know, as we got older, Melissa and I were bringing some other new people for him to love in the family. And most of you know, Michelle and I graduated college together, and on graduation day we met each other's parents. I remember she was getting all sorts of honors, and I was just graduating. And my dad said, she's that smart and pretty. You better keep her. And I said, Michelle, he had tremendous love and respect for you. He saw you like he saw the matriarchs of his youth that inspired him. Loving and strong, the rock that we all rely on when the storms come. Knowing that you were there to take care of me and the kids gave him tremendous comfort. I vividly remember the day we told him he'd be a grandfather for the first time. I don't think I ever in 52 years saw his face light up the way it did that day. Every life event, births, bar mitzvahs, brises, wedding, his face just glowed with love and pride. Jordan, there was nothing you could do. I was going to say something really embarrassing, Jordan. I'm not going to do it. But he loved Jordan so much. There was nothing, because she was she was, from the time she was little, she was just like him. Insanely organized, meticulous to a degree only the great minds can handle. He was so proud of every one of your academic and professional achievements. And he told me not long ago, when you went to see him, he was just so proud of the woman you become. But my dad was old school, so of course when we had the first boy, that was something else. And Noah, there's some people said you look kind of like him outside in those pictures. You have one face, but to me it's your smile, your sense of humor, your ability to stay calm in the craziest of circumstances all remind me of him. The love of sports that the two of you shared was deeper than anything he and I had together. Mostly because I just never loved baseball. I thought it was boring. But he loved watching it. He loved watching you play. He loved going to the Phillies games with you. But obviously it goes without saying, the thing he shared most with you was his love of golf. And he loved that you were a great player. But he was so proud of how you carried yourself on the course, even at a young age. He'd always say, don't let him become a pro golfer. He should be in business. So there you go. My dad loved singing and dancing in theater. That was one of his loves. And Dylan, you took on his love for musicals, and he got such a thrill over the years from watching you perform. I'd say to him, Dad, you want to go to one of the Dylan shows? He'd say, no, I want to go to all the shows. And he was so proud of every award and achievement you got and everything you set your mind to. And Braden, your kind heart and compassion for everyone around you, that's the legacy he left inside you. From his early DuPont days, my dad was a bowler. He was in a bowling league also in the winter. They couldn't play golf. And all of a sudden, Braden shows an interest. He's on the bowling team. Next thing you know, my dad's 89. He shows up at the door with a bunch of pads and a small bowling ball. And he goes down in the basement and starts building a training center for Braden. And so that Brady could throw the bowling ball against the wall, and the padding was supposedly going to keep the wall from getting damaged, which it didn't. But he wanted every kid to be the best that they can be. He was so proud of you, Brad. He was so proud of everyone else at school and how great you're doing. Jacob and Macy, I could go on and on about the two of you. He would tell me how lucky he was to have such incredible grandchildren. He said, Steve, I'm lucky. And it's only now that I kind of figure out it wasn't luck. It takes a lifetime of hard work to sort of yield that return. But he would always say, every phone call, you're what Jacob did, you're what Macy did. And he loved Sunday night dinners with the whole family. Loved when we would all get together. And, just like he seamlessly integrated Michelle into the family and Rose's family into Rose's family into us. John came along. And those of you with daughters, I hope you're like me and lucky enough to have a son-in-law as devoted as John. My dad loved you so much. Your loyalty and devotion to him over the last 20-something years is something to behold. In particular, the way you cared for him over the last few years, and the way you cared for his daughter and his grandchildren. I think at some point he stopped seeing you as a son-in-law and just as a son. You set an example for me for caring and tenderness that I'd never seen before, and I thought I'd seen it all. And finally, Melissa, you were my dad's world. I've told you all how loving and giving my dad was, and how he took care of Rose at the end. Really just giving up everything that was his, personal passions, to just take care of the woman he loved. And I know if he was here, he would be so proud that lesson resonated with Melissa, because really, for the last, 5 years, 7 years, she's pretty much done nothing but take care of my dad. And not just take him to doctors, but literally was there around the clock, 24/7, to love him and care for him the way that he never had someone looking out for him as a kid. I told this to the family yesterday, made the analogy of how my dad cared for Rose and how Melissa cared for my dad, but thank you. Because if it wasn't for you, he would have been gone a long time ago. I look around this chapel and I'd say most of us are fortunate in many ways. But quite possibly the most fortunate that we have people in our lives that can make an indelible mark. The mark my dad left us is to give love however we can, whenever we can, to whomever we can. Dad, I'm going to do my best to love you.
To those who didn't know Sol Schwartz, there's no way to describe in just a few words how great a man he was in any detail. And for those who knew him, you would understand that I would need dozens of pages. For most people, the father-in-law, the term dad was just a name that they would refer to. But for me, I truly called him that, like he was my second father. Someone I admired, respected, loved from the bottom of my heart. Before Melissa and I had kids, and I started working with PCM with Steve and Dad, I used to fly from Boston to Cherry Hill and stay Monday through Thursday, and I'd fly back with Melissa on the weekends. But that happened for about 11 months. And I would drive into the office every day with Sol. We'd work, come home, we'd have dinner together, and a lot of times we ended up on the couch watching the Phillies games. We'd go to the games, but a lot of times it was talking about baseball, which he loved so much. I learned as a kid that his brother Jerry took him to Shibe Park, and they were part of the knot hole game. And that was where the kids that didn't have money for tickets would peer through the knot holes in the fence watching the Philadelphia A's games. And he often talked about some of his favorite players, Sam Chapman, Pudd'nhead Jones, and especially his favorite, Indian Bob Johnson. When thinking about how to simply describe Sol in a simple few words, I kept coming up with the same one word, and that was good. He was truly a good man. He was a mensch. Cared for others and strangers. And while attending Phillies games with Sol, I witnessed on many occasions a concessionaire would come down the row, whether it was hot dogs or beer or whatever, and he would just reach into his pocket and just take a step and give the guy $10 or $15, and the guy would reach for whatever he was selling, and he just sat back down, and that was it. And I would just watch the same expression time and time again of these same people, confused about why someone was just handing them money. And they would pass by, and Sol he'd tell me, oh, well, that guy used to work as a Philadelphia police officer, and he lost his job, and he now works for the concessions, and so he struggled a little. And I just understand, that was part of Sol. He didn't just do that. Steve alluded to all the charities that he gave to, and the stacks of things that would come into the office. It wasn't a handful or a dozen, it was over 100. And the list that one of the secretaries used to keep for him just kept getting longer and longer. If he didn't have such a successful career in the Teflon coating industry, I think he would have made one amazing therapist or a radio talk show host, because the experience that his life gave him great ability to help people out in the times when they were in need or had a question or needed advice, and he would reference the Torah, or he would give you that advice in such a warm way that you would notice that you needed to keep quiet and listen to him, and you knew he was right. I'm only just scratching the surface of how wonderful Dad was. Hopefully many years from now, when God says it's my time, aside from being blessed with having been part of the lives of my beloved Melissa, Macy, and Jacob, there are two cherished moments and memories in my life that I know will have completed my life. The first one gave me the honor of holding my hand, the hand of my father Leon at the time of his passing, and now another blessing that just allowed me to stand alongside with Melissa at Sol's bedside, holding his hand, whispering the Shema to Sol's ear as the last beat of his heart stopped. May the memory of Sol Schwartz always be a blessing.
No, grandchildren.
I've been lucky in high school and college to have some amazing teachers, but I don't think any of them compare to what my grandfather's given me over the last 22 years. I used to think it was somewhat of a coincidence. Now I'm not so sure, but no matter what any of my siblings, cousins, or I were passionate about, he somehow had done at some point in his life and was always, wanted to be our number one teacher. Baseball, golf, tennis, bowling, singing. He seemed to know exactly how to teach us and make us feel like, we could be our best selves. For me, he was the first to take me onto the golf course, and what he taught me wasn't as much the golf swing or how to putt, even though he said he was the best putter in the world. But the most important part's the game. Honesty, integrity, respect, and being a gentleman. All doing those things at the same time while competing to be the best. I know he loved that I became a golfer and shared in another one of his passions. I know by the time I started playing in college, he wasn't healthy enough to come to any of my tournaments, but when he did come, and I always thought there was always the chance he would show up, I always made sure to carry myself, that if he did, he'd be proud of me. The other day, I saw the pictures and scrolling through text on his phone. He actually had screen grabbed every highlight of me from any tournaments that I played in or any achievements that I had that he ever mentioned me. We shared so many things, and weirdly enough, he got his first and only hole-in-one on my birthday in 2006. That was 2 days ago, the same day that he passed. I'll always remember that ace. But Pop also wanted to share the things that he was passionate with all of us, and me and my siblings and my cousins. And there was nothing more that he enjoyed more than the Phillies. For as long as I could remember, I'd be sitting with him on the third baseline, eating ice cream out of those little plastic helmets. But more distinctly, I remember a song that he would sing called High Hopes, sung by Harry Callis, to the crowd. And Pop, who was always a big singer, would sing as loud as anyone else in our section. The song talks about an ant that was looking at an impossible task, but it still always believed that it could get the job done. No matter what he taught us, the first thing Pop always pushed for us was to believe in ourselves and try our best. He never stopped telling us how much he loved us, and even as we all grew older, and somehow the Phillies found a way to get worse, Pop never stopped taking us to ball games, never stopped singing, and never stopped telling us to be our best selves. I'd like to think that even now, he's still singing High Hopes. When we were talking the other day, the whole family, reminiscing, hearing the stories of, that everyone had, my dad, Aunt Missy, my mom, Unky, I was thinking about the man that he had led everyone in his lives to be. But then, when Rabbi asked me of any memories, it didn't take long for me to think of my experiences and the time that I had with him, to remember what how he's touched all of us and has made my dad the man he is and the father he has been for me, and my mom for me, and Aunt Missy and Unky to Macy and Jacob, and how it is inspiring me to hopefully one day be the same for everyone in my lives. He was an amazing man and a true hero and an inspiration to all of us.
Sean Cohen, please.
Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Cohen, and Rose Cohen was my mother, and she found herself unmarried when I was in college, and in my mid-20s, through her, I met Sol when they got married, and Sol rescued my mother. For 25 years, he made her the happiest woman that I knew of. And they shared a special kind of love affair for that 25 years that everyone in the family, I think, drew upon and loves to emulate and brag about. It was sweet the way they doted on each other all the time. And Saul used to sometimes refer to my mother as the potential Messiah. And he meant it. And Saul was just a loving, beautiful man to my mother, and it was so important for me to have that hole filled in my life. And if he had done nothing other than that, he would have earned my enduring love and admiration. But as Stephen said so eloquently, we all became his family. He never drew a line between whose child belonged to who. He somehow, as much as he opened up his heart to Rose, or Rowie as he liked to call her, opened up his heart to all of us in my family. He became, even though I had a father and I had a grandfather and all these things, he became a father to me. And he became a father to my wife, Leslie. And he became a doting grandfather to all of our kids. He would get down on his knees when it didn't look that comfortable and sing Yiddish lullabies to them and bend his thumb back in a very unnatural way that made them laugh so hard. And just was such a cute grandfather, and in many ways brought that relationship to them from a grandfather who didn't provide them all of that. And so he really is so loved by them. And beyond that, when so much of what I wanted to talk about has been covered so well by everybody, but I'll leave you with a short story. For those of you who know, my mother, turned ill many years ago, and it was a slow, insidious kind of illness, and we lost her over time. And Sol would visit her at the home all the time, and I mean all the time. When I used to visit, everyone used to come over there, and Sol was like a superhero. They would say, "Oh, here's Sol's son-in-law. He's here all the time. He's the best. He takes such good care of your mom." But there did come a point where we would visit her, and I was coming from far away. I would come in from out of town and spend a few hours with her, and it was sad because she didn't necessarily know we were there and didn't know who we were. And I would cry when I would leave, and I would always spend the night with Sol when I would come into town. He would say, "I'm going to go to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock tonight, just to let you know." But we always, during those visits, would stay up till midnight talking about politics and our families. We had so much fun. But I remember distinctly one of those visits when I just was sitting there holding her hand, and I had to do all the talking, and I brushed her hair, and she wouldn't look at me in the eyes, and it made me so sad. And I said, "Sol, you're such a good caretaker. I just can never thank you enough for taking care of my mom, because being far away, it makes me feel vulnerable, and you're just wonderful to her." And he said, "John, every second I have with her is a gift, so please don't thank me. It's what I want. Every second gives me pleasure, even to this day." And he meant it. So we all love Sol, and I think I speak on behalf of all the family here too, that I hope that Sol and Rowie are reunited up there, and that she's showering him with kisses, and they're making up for all the time they lost recently. And I will miss him terribly. He was a wonderful, wonderful man, and I know he loved all of you very much.
Thank you, John. If either one called you, will listen.
How lucky were we? We were so lucky to have that guy for a dad, to have that guy for a grandfather. That's why I went there every day. Because wouldn't you want to spend as much time as you could with such a great guy? Because we always knew that day would come to an end. And I just wanted to get as much into it and as much time as I could with him. And he thought we were all so terrific. And he told us that every day. And he never made me feel anything less. I'm so not funny, and he just thought that I was like the funniest. And I have such a terrible singing voice, but he thought like it sounded like birds. And he would make me sing at Passover Seders like alone, up until this past Seder, and it was so bad. that's one thing that hadn't come up, is that he was so funny. I mean, he had such a sense of humor. And I was telling Steve last night, I was telling him a little story of something that just came up that he said 2 weeks ago, and it was so, like 2 weeks, and he hadn't been feeling well at all, and I wish I could share the story, but it's just so inappropriate. But if you see me later, I'll tell you. It's that good. It really was. It's been a hard year. My dad had so many complex medical problems, and there was always something. Always something. But in the midst of all that, I just got to have so many countless precious moments with him that I'll always be able to hang on to. Jacob, the other day, when Papa died, Jake and I share a love of hip-hop music, and Jacob was telling me he was listening to the song by P. Diddy called "I'll Be Missing You." It's a song, a tribute to a rapper from the 90s called Notorious B.I.G. And often people refer to Notorious B.I.G. as like the OG gangster, the original gangster, and of rap. And so I was listening to the song yesterday on my walk, and like it just hit me, and I was like, Sol Schwartz. Like Sol Schwartz was the original gangster. Like look up the term in Urban Dictionary, and he was the original gangster. My sweet loving dad. I can't believe you're gone. It was an honor and a pleasure to be your daughter. I love you.
And it was our honor to hear these really touching words of tribute by the family. We'll have the opportunity to comfort them and to share stories of our own. We don't sit Shiva on Shabbat, but there'll be Shiva services when Shabbos is over on Sunday and on Monday. On Sunday, family will be receiving at Melissa and John's home, starting at 5:30, and the davening that night will be at 7. And on Monday night, at Steve and Michelle's home, receiving from 6 o'clock on, and the services will be at 7:30. Please rise now for the memorial prayers.
ונאמר אמן.
Exalted God, full of compassion, we pray that you grant perfect peace under the wings of your sheltering presence to the beautiful soul of Sol Schwartz, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember the countless acts of kindness he shared with so many as he graced this, the land of the living. May his soul thus be bound in the bond of eternal life, his memory a source of comfort and inspiration to all who knew and loved him forever. Together we say, Amen. You may be seated, please.
You can have the pallbearers to the center aisle. Doing each side, I'm just going to ask you to come out along the queues. Yeah, so we're going to have one person on this queue. Do we have that now? If we can all rise once more, please.
Sina vi söker om vi talar ut om vi pratar Laila vi kan ju